Hello, this is the part 2 of the talk on psychotherapy, and it's about transcultural psychotherapy. The overview on transcultural psychotherapy. The world in the shape of a client can come to our interviewing room. Current demographics indicate that generally cultures are multicultural, multi-faith, multi-ethnic, and compromises both majority and minority groups. Cultural groups can be powerfully determined by history and consequently sadly characterized by misunderstandings, tension, discrimination, violence, and racism. Psychotherapists and counselors have the mission to extend their empathic capacities according to cultural history and beliefs. Therapists not only need to understand the operational nature of different isms in society, such as sexism, racism, etc., but to understand how they are affected and impacted by them. Understanding the isms, power, powerlessness, black issues, whiteness, race, culture, ethnicity, communication values, and equal opportunities legislation are key elements towards the understanding of diversities. Multicultural therapy involves referencing to the intersecting cultural factors of race, age, gender, socioeconomic status, disability, sexual orientation, religion, and spirituality. Therapists have to be aware in order to achieve a successful connection with patients that globalization and advancing technology have led to the transcending of language, social and geographical barriers at extraordinary speeds through social networking, as well as promoting democracy and equality through information exchange. Cultural empathy develops from the therapist's ability to connect and explicitly address cultural experiences attached to the patient or client emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. An anti-oppressive understanding of practice should be developed so as to avoid the perpetuation of oppression by exclusion or denial and lack of response to social and cultural themes. A complementary cross-cultural interaction in therapy will be successful if the counselor, psychotherapist, or psychotherapist has achieved a level of racial, ethnic identity that is characterized by a strong inner vision of him/herself as a racial ethnic being accompanied by an appreciation of racial ethnic diversity. Ethnic dissimilarity is often associated with reduced therapy uptake, increased premature dropouts, reduced duration, and post-therapy functioning. Quantitative data suggests that reduced differences in the constituents of ethnicity, such as language and culture, play an important role, and that often is the client acculturation where their competence in the host culture counterbalances the therapist's cultural incompetence. I'm going to talk a little bit about working with different groups and diversity and difference. Working with refugees. Refugees require extra time allocation as English might not be their second language. Bring interpreters, translators to assist. Seek specialist knowledge to work with issues of cultural displacement, homesickness, political torture, effects on war, cultural shock, isolation, family disruption, house and immigration problems. Working with lesbians and gay men. Work through external and internalized homophobic and heterosexist messages. Maintain empathy by learning about and understanding lesbians and gay men's identity and needs. Affirm lesbians and gay men lifestyles as viable and legitimate alternative life choices. And it's important to recognize the diversity of lesbians and gay men, as well as the social, political issues which led to feelings of powerlessness, exclusion, and marginalization. Working with Black and Asian patients or clients. It's important to actively deal with racism operating through individual, institutional, intentional, and unintentional levels. Become aware of hidden feelings and subtle expressions of indifference, such as not being concerned in the concerns of the racial other. Take account of supportive structures within different communities, such as the role of religion, religious practices, and rituals. On working with women, recognize and be aware of all forms of oppression and how these interact with sexism. Be aware of the biological, psychological, cultural, and social issues that have an impact on women in general and on particular groups of women in society. Do not engage in sexual activity with women under any circumstances. Be aware of unacceptable touching and more overt sexual contact. Working with people with disabilities. Avoid the tendency to make decisions on behalf of the disabled person, which deny them control over their own life. Recognize that the problem for people with disabilities lies not within the individual bodies, but with the way society fails to organize its resources to include people with disabilities. Working with racism and the racist. Failure to combat racism in any form is not just a simple act of racism, it's a perpetuation of racism. If you are not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Those who remain silent to racist behavior are likely to be colluding with its negative effects. Maintain a proactive stance by challenging offensive and all forms of behavior, which excludes Black people, Asians, Jews, Irish people, and those people who represent the hidden white minority groups such as Greeks or Germans, etc. And working with yourself. Re-examine your own values and beliefs and how they have been influenced. Be willing to learn new patterns of thinking, perceiving, and behaving. Stay with a natural discomfort, stirred by difference, and allow yourself to become familiar with the new effects. Be open to meeting the unknown and unfamiliar. I'm going to talk a little bit about asylum seekers and how to work with them. Therapists need to examine their own beliefs and biases towards this group in order for this group to be included in therapeutic decisions. Therapists must resist the temptation to assume that language difficulties and cultural difference amount to simplicity and reduced intellect, as well as possible doubts that human beings could survive atrocities. Therapists need to build self-awareness, self-challenge, acquisition of knowledge, and adaptability when working with asylum seekers. Working with patients of African heritage, some of the key points. On language, African heritage include diversity of languages, French, Portuguese, and Arabic. Some of the languages carry the history of past colonialism, which is often a reminder of previous oppression, prejudice, and delusion of original heritage through colonization. Heritage, traditional philosophies, religions, cultural beliefs, and knowledge are transmitted among people through language. Language is a critical important element in the construction and affirmation of identity and heritage. On religion and spirituality among African heritage population. From an African perspective, religion constitutes practices, teachings, rituals, and beliefs that are linked to cultural practice and way of life. Perception and views of self on becoming a person through others involves living through various community prescribed stages and having involvement in certain ceremonies and rituals. Regarding their life cycles, traditional marriage and family life constitute significant aspects of African heritage with traditional guidelines, including mentoring on how to be the best lover, wife, or husband. Acceptance that their world views is influenced by African heritage is culturally specific to their experiences. Explore the patient-client functioning and development of self-concept in relation to a collective culture. Openness to explanations and concepts of mental and physical health, which can be different from Western cultures, are very important. The awareness of the power of the tribal group, the openness to explore the life, the space cycles in life, the exploration of experiences through symbolic, metaphoric expression and meaning. On working with patients of Australian heritage, this is some of the key points. Australians are expected to uphold the shared principles and values that underpin Australian society. These are respect for the equal worth, dignity, and freedom of the individual, freedom of speech, religion, and secular government, freedom of associations and equality under the law, equality of men and women, equality of opportunity, peacefulness, and mutual respect and compassion for those in need. On working with patients of European heritage, this is some of the key points. While residence within another culture can be a source of richness and development, it can equally be a source of anxiety and distress. Culture and diversity are dynamic processes, and both are subject to change with new experiences and relationships. Coming together with diverse cultures can be challenging and transforming for patient, client, psychotherapist alike, giving us pause to reflect on our values, norms, and behaviors. We should not assume that because appearances are the same, that we are the same. Working with patients of a Middle Eastern heritage, Iranian heritage, people of Iranian heritage. Iranians appreciate and respond well to a directive therapeutic approach and problem-solving strategies, as opposed to passive, non-directive, analytic, exploratory approaches. They need to hear that the therapist has expertise, competence, and credentials to help them with their problems and establish a therapeutic alliance. Iranians refrain from criticizing or embarrassing each other in public. Therefore, truthfulness may be avoided if it is hurtful. Disagreements tend to be expressed through humor, sarcasm, and wit. Iranians are generally compassionate and demonstrative and respond well to attentive, warm, empathic, and non-judgmental attitudes. Age is synonymous with respect, experience, expertise, and knowledge. When treating Iranians with major mental illness, therapists need to use psychoeducation to increase the patient awareness of the disorder, to increase their engagement, and avoid stigma. Use of interpreters is recommended when working with Iranians with limited command in English. On working with patients of a South American heritage, some of the key points are that South America has experienced a significant period of colonization, being the majority of immigrants Italians, Spanish, and Germans, but also included other European and Asian peoples such as Portuguese, Polish, Slovakian, Ukrainian, Russian, Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, Japanese, Chinese, Indian, and Korean. South Americans are individuals whose identities have been formed in an essentially multi-ethnic context and from a variety of ancestries. People from the poorest areas of the region, without food to eat and living in extremely unsafe and dangerous contexts, still present with feelings of belonging and high degree of connection with family members, friends, and their social environment. Emotional attachment to places and other individuals is a quality portrayed as friendly for foreigners, but is in fact to maintain high spirits by cooperating with each other to survive everyday challenge of life. The emotional attachment can be a sign of strength in some patients, clients, but also might be a weakness in striving for independence. The majority of South American therapists develop their professional identity in the field of psychology. The theoretical and practical approaches in therapy are associated with psychoanalysis. Working with patients of Bangladeshi heritage. Bangladeshi Families Unit is primordial. Bangladeshi culture encourages a collective identity and interdependence. Obedience and respect for elders serve to reinforce the importance of the family as a hub. The honor of a Bangladeshi is paramount, and it's each individual duty to maintain the family's honor and good name. Food in Bangladeshi culture is the glue that holds the family together and a vehicle for the communication of emotions. Bangladeshi family units are patriarchal. Sex is one of the biggest taboos in Bangladeshi culture. It is not deemed permissible before marriage in most traditional families from the Indian subcontinent, and marriage is highly conservative. Working with patients of Indian heritage. These are some of the key points. Indian culture possesses a strong bridge between reality and mythology. Focusing on Indian festivals are of paramount importance as they are linked to mythology, nature, and everyday life. Non-verbal behavior is important to consider within the therapeutic approach. For example, people moving their head from side to side signify acquiescence, agreement, or understanding compared to people nodding in the Western world. Respect for the elders is a tradition in the Indian culture. Symbolism is rife in Indian culture, in religious texts, and in more modern realm of Bollywood. These are some of the key points on working with patients of Chinese heritage. Regarding their character, Chinese people have been described as possessing a national character of social orientation, which includes features as conforming to social norms, adopting inoffensive strategies in interpersonal dealings, submitting to social expectations, and submitting to authority. Chinese people, compared to those of other cultures, have been found to be lacking in autonomy, aggression, extroversion, and to exhibit excessive submissiveness, conformity, and susceptibility to the influences of those more powerful than themselves. Regarding their religion, the ancient Chinese were not as concerned with religion. Ethics provided the spiritual basis of Chinese civilization, and philosophy was a tool dealing with values higher than moral ones. China has never had a national religion. Traditionally, the Chinese worship heaven as the origin of everything in the material world. Ancestor worship was the most important ritual that gave people a sense of connection to something larger than their individual lives. Today, the main organized religions in China are Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, and Christianity. Taoist religion is the only indigenous belief system. The rest having been introduced to China at different historic points and then modified to suit Chinese culture. Regarding their philosophy, the main concern in traditional Chinese philosophy is human society, not the universe. Confucius emphasized the moral cultivation of men. The idea is that a person should strive to maintain psychosocial homeostasis by accommodating one's behavior to the preordained standards of one's in-group society and culture. Traditional Chinese society. Within the traditional Chinese society, the family is a central unifying system. Within traditional Chinese groups, there are 5 traditional social relationships: sovereign and subject, father and son, elder and younger brother, husband and wife, and friend. These are called the Wu, Lun, or the 5 cardinal relationships. The Chinese think on the individual in the group. The person may be part of a group and an individual at the same time. Authority-wise, the Chinese believe It has belief that somebody had to be in charge. Historically, ordinary Chinese prefer to leave the job of governance to their rulers. They may be submissive but not subjugated. Within the modern Chinese life, arranged marriages are part of the past, but parental approval for marriage is still expected. Married couples tend to live in nuclear families. Divorce is a fairly new phenomenon in Chinese society. Chinese women's self-esteem derives from the norms of chastity and the importance placed on the family. Chinese parents tend to be attentive and protective of very young children, but become strict when the child reaches a certain age where they are prepared for the fulfillment of social and final obligations in adulthood. Regarding their mental health, China seems to be moving towards both increasingly accepting the demarcation of body and mind and psychologizing mental distress rather than taking the traditional holistic stance towards health. In China, female suicides exceed male suicides, and rural areas are higher incidence of suicide than urban areas. Chinese people have a higher proclivity towards suicide, supported by Confucian beliefs that suicide is appropriate in certain situations of great suffering, by Buddhist beliefs in relation to speeding the process of reincarnation, and by Taoist beliefs in becoming ghosts capable of returning for vengeance. Child abuse was not recognized as a social problem until recently, and wife abuse was culturally sanctioned as part of men's control over women. Public opinion now condemns domestic violence, although legally still treated as a domestic affair. When seeking counseling, Chinese patients have a lower tolerance for ambiguity, prefer a structured situation and problem solving over insight-oriented psychotherapy, and exhibit a lower level of verbal and emotional expressiveness. Trust is of the essence. Regarding working with patients of Japanese heritage, the key points are: Japanese people find communication using the English language extremely difficult and stressful. Other key points include that Japan is largely homogeneous and most Japanese people do not mix with non-Japanese in Japan. An aspect of the communication style entails trying to understand what others mean without words, and instead conveying meaning through innuendo and subtleties. Avoiding conflict is a high priority, and Japanese people are not culturally encouraged to express strong personal views on a wide range of issues. Communication is adjusted according to hierarchical rules. Hierarchy is established mainly on seniority, social roles, and gender. Counselors or therapists need to appreciate the complexities they may face with communication. Always bear in mind that Japanese cultural origins are collectivist, and be aware of how much value might compare with your own. Due to language barriers, they experience the power dynamics of interpersonal relationships are prevalent, and this could be translated into the therapeutic relationship. This is the end of part 2 on transcultural psychotherapy, and I'm leaving some references for your review. Thank you very much.